Senator Sollman, with your open.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I rise today in support of Senate Bill 548, a bill that raises the age of marriage to 18 with no loopholes in order to protect our youth. This is a concept that Senator Brock Smith and I learned about at the NCSL annual summit this past summer. I called the advocates the best dressed in the room. They were decked out in wedding gown attire, and it caught my eye, and I had to learn more. Senator Brock Smith and I decided to bring this bill forward together as a show of bipartisan support for the protection of young Oregonians. Currently in Oregon, a child who is 17 years old cannot vote, thankfully, and should not have the access to buy a pack of smokes, but a 17-year-old is allowed to go to the chapel and get married. An article in the Oregonian published last week estimates that one Oregon youth under the age of 18 gets married roughly every other day on average. Of those married, and predominantly they're girls, they are more likely to experience poverty, domestic violence, high-risk adolescent pregnancies, mental health and substance use disorders, and often have limited opportunities for educational and career advancement. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services also found links between forced child marriages and human trafficking. A study showed that 83% of underage marriages were girls marrying men roughly 4 years their elder. Even those who attempt to leave the marriage are not allowed to file for divorce as a minor and often struggle to protect themselves, leave home, access shelters, and file protective orders. Married children are often given the same privileges as married adults, which leaves them trapped and at risk. The United Nations Children's Fund defines marriage before the age of 18 as a fundamental violation of human rights. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals call for global action to end child marriage by 2030. Thank you to the passionate, dedicated, and determined advocates from Unchained at Last and for their work on this policy. Thank you to those that shared their heartfelt story of trauma and why the need for this change is so real. Colleagues, Senate Bill 548 is a bipartisan and bicameral solution to help protect the children of Oregon, and I urge an aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Is there discussion? Recognize Senator Robinson.
I'd just like to explain, this issue has come up. I've been talked to by the people that support it, and I'm completely in sympathy with what they're trying to do. They've got a real problem, apparently, with certain instances of child trafficking. I also am not a fan of people getting married young. Even 18 is often too young. What worries me is that there are instances in which a 17-year-old really should get married. Stable families, it's well known that children who grow up in families with two parents do much better. And there are instances which we can go into, but there are instances in which two 17-year-olds or a 17 or 8-year-old would be better off if they just went ahead and got married. There are many instances in which they shouldn't. But the concern I have is what will be the unintended consequences. Now, I was a little surprised. I went to look at the law that if you're under 17, your parents, or one parent, it only takes one parent, has to sign off, but there's nothing in the law requiring the two people getting married to sign the marriage license, and that I think is a mistake. I sort of assumed that underage you'd have to get a marriage license, but a parent or one or two parents would have to sign. So I'm sort of the opinion that maybe we should be looking at bolstering checking requirements, maybe have an interview with a judge, definitely make sure that the two people do want to get married. But I'm a little worried about changing the marriage age because I don't know how much that will affect other people and change their lives. So I'm going to vote no for that reason, but I'm completely in sympathy with what you're trying to do. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Additional discussion? Seeing no additional discussion, Senator Brock Smith, we hear closing.
Thank you, Mr. President, colleagues. I appreciate the discussion from my colleague on this bill, and I rise, of course, in chief sponsoring this piece of legislation, and with my colleague from Senate District 15. Colleagues, you've heard the information with regards to how this is impactful to Oregonians, especially those Oregonians that are being forcibly married at an age younger than 18. We witnessed the data from individuals that a lot of these are involved with pregnancies and so forth, and they don't, and statistically, they don't last into long-term marriages. But colleagues, we also, if you have a broader, we have a broader conversation in this building from time to time. I remember in the House when we had the discussion about juvenile justice reform, and many of my colleagues on the floor here were talking about how our youth don't really know how to make these decisions until their mid-20s, right? Until they really understand when their brains are fully developed, and we had those discussions. We've raised the minimum tobacco age to 21 because of these very things. And frankly, colleagues, I mean, this is one of the reasons why we shouldn't be having a conversation about letting 16-year-olds vote for school board elections, because they're just not there as well. And so just like for those reasons, we have this reason here, add the human trafficking, add the additional conversation that we've had on this piece of legislation, and you come to the conclusion. I hope that you support Senate Bill 548 with your yes vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. The question now rises upon the third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 548. Those who have the opinion the bill should be passed will answer aye as their names are called. Those opposed, no. And the clerk will please call the roll.
Meek. Nash. Patterson. Pham. Krasonsky. Reynolds. Robinson. Brock Smith. Sollman. Starr. Taylor. Thatcher. Weber. Woods. Anderson. Bonham. Broadman. Campos. Frederick. Gilter-Bluen. Girard. Golden. Gorsuch. Hayden. Hayden. Jama. Lieber. Linthicum. Manning. McLean. President Wagner.
Aye.
Excused. Thatcher. Voting nay. Robinson. 28 ayes.
Senate Bill 548, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed.